This is the web transcription service of the Royal Canadian Military Institute. On June the 7th, 2018, the Institute held its annual D-Day Dodgers Luncheon, celebrating the veterans of the Italian campaign and those who follow in their footsteps. Our speaker is veteran gunner Captain Jack Rhind.
It is my pleasure to say a few words of introduction about our speaker, Jack Rhind. If I go backwards in time, I'd have to say a part of his fame today is derived from visiting numerous school groups where he is revered and respected for his storytelling. If I go back 5 years, there was an article written in the Toronto Star by Jim Coyle about a group of 200 Toronto Club members who had volunteered to serve in World War II. Jack and the survivors said it's not the golf, but the spinning of war stories as part of the overseas boys, as they used to call them, that kept them quite active. Now, going back even further, his financial degrees were put to good use after the war. He has been president and chair of the National Life Assurance Company, the chair of Confederation Life, chairman of Midland and Walwyn, and many more. Along with these professional accomplishments, he is a devoted volunteer. Some of the things that he's done has been the chairman and president of the Toronto Western Hospital. And there are so many organizations that if you have time later on, not now, you can Google John Jack Rhind, because his accomplishments and his time spent volunteering are quite memorable. Now, as you know from the flyer, Jack was a captain in the Royal Canadian Artillery, serving in Italy in 1944. And he said, "Imagine the resentment by those who survived the Italian campaign when they were later labeled the D-Day Dodgers." So we're here today to salute the D-Day Dodgers. And Jack, thanks to you, my grandparents and aunts were able to survive the horrors of World War II in Italy. So the Falcones thank you because they enjoyed the benefits of being liberated by the Canadians. So please welcome a Canadian legend, Jack Rhind.
Oh, wow. What an impressive group here. It's, yes, I don't know what I'm going to talk to you people about. You know as much about a lot of, and I'm certainly outranked. I'm sitting beside a general. I have to call him sir. Yeah, so many, and a lot of other gunners here, so I don't know what you want me to talk about. And it is getting on, and I know a lot of you want to get back to your offices, so please, I quite understand it. You've heard a lot already, and probably enough, so I'll quite understand it if you get up and leave, and if there's one or two of you left at the end, that's okay with me. Okay, so, I don't know that I could talk about being a D-Day Dodger, but there's some of you out here that are, I know, so you probably could give this talk as well or better than I. But anyway, I guess I do qualify as a D-Day Dodger. I was I was lucky, of course, to be a D-Day Dodger. Just think how fortunate that was. I mean, I missed I missed the Northwest Europe fighting, and I had all the pleasure of Italy and the wonderful climate of Italy, and you know, the Italian army was, you know, well, there were a few Germans there. Yeah, I think the Nazis. There were 23 Panzer divisions, and the Italians, of course, they quit and joined us. But yeah, well, we weren't all that lucky, and we did fight a little long, but. Others here can talk better than I probably about being a D-Day Dodger. It wasn't a very sunny. Italy didn't turn out to be so sunny. You know, the mud was something awful. I did keep it, which you weren't allowed to, a diary. As a matter of fact, a diary which I wrote every day in action, which you weren't allowed to do because if you were captured, of course, they might learn something about where you were and stuff like that. So, and I think, in the announcement of this lunch today, they quoted a couple of things. Everybody read, I won't try to read anything out of my diary. You've seen those two excerpts out of my diary. There's a lot more I could read. Well, just maybe with the one about the mud. Well, it's just the sunny Italy. Where do I got here? Here. This is February, the middle of February the 16th. I'm writing in my diary, and I'm saying, it rained and snowed most of last night. I woke up to find our gun position was a sea of mud and water and slush. I couldn't conceive how we were going to make a gun position out of it, and so on and so on. I mean, there's more. And then farther on, this is, I'm reading out of this diary, which I don't know how I wrote this thing at the time. And steady, heavy snow falling, and the mud again is increasingly deep. Two of our quads, the quads were the tractors that towed them. Two of our quads are mired. We get one out, but give the second one up after breaking the winch and so on and blah blah. It's a very tough break for the boys, as the conditions are worse and so on than they have had. They're very chilly and wet and mud. I'll stop in a second. There's just maybe one bit more here. An appalling mess of slush and mud. Everyone is soaked to the skin. There's nowhere for the men to put their bedrolls. I produce a bottle of cognac. Oh no, well that's all right. So anyway, there's more of that stuff in these diaries, but just here the two of them. It's enough of that. So yeah, oh gosh, there was something in the New Yorker. This is a page out of the New Yorker. In 1989, they're talking about the Italian campaign, and I don't know whether I won't read that. They were saying how awful it was, and that having struggled with the bitter cold and the torrents of rain and snow, the lakes of, they're talking about the Italian campaign in Italy, and the mud that sucked down the machines and so on. I can't read this in this. And deeply dug fortifications in which the Germans kept the truth. It seems to me that no soldiers in history ever were given more difficult conditions. So anyway, that was sunny Italy, and we lucky D-Day Dodgers were able to enjoy that. But enough of that. So how did we come to fight in Italy? I'll bet most of you know the history of this as well or better than I do. I can see there's such an intelligent group here and you're all knowledgeable that I don't know what to tell you. But I can tell you that, I can't credit for making the decision. I better look at the time. The decision to go, because one day we're in England training, as we had been doing for months and months, and one day the colonel called the officers together and said, we're going to continue training over in Ireland. We thought, that's kind of a strange thing. So we packed up our guns and all our vehicles and put them on a ship. And this ship was a gorgeous U.S. American ocean ship. It was a luxury ship, and we couldn't believe it. Tablecloths and food that I don't know. So anyway, we sail off, and what are we doing in this big ship just going to Ireland? And then 2 days go by, and my God, it's taking a long time. And then we look up, and we're up. Holy smoke, that's the Straits of Gibraltar. And so, wow, now we know things are going to be a little different. And we're sailing through the Mediterranean, and very soon we're dive bombed by, I guess the Germans, yes. And by God, the ship right behind us gets bombed and knocked out and in our convoy, we weren't allowed to stop and help because there were other destroyers. So anyway, that was how I got to Italy, and enjoy the pleasures of Italy and the wonderful conditions fighting there. But anyway, how did we come to? Why did we, the Allies, ever choose to go to Italy? Well, I don't think I need to give you a history lesson. I'll bet you everybody in this room, if I asked them, you would put up your hand and you could explain it better than I could. But in case there's anybody that, I'll just give a quick brief history. You remember the war started in September 1939, and by in 8 months' time in May, the Allies had been pushed back across the channel into England, where we sat and so on for months and years. And then there was the Americans came. Well, Pearl Harbor, when was it? It was in 41, was it December 41, and then we did try one. Dieppe, wasn't it? We tried to cross, and that was an absolute disaster, as you know, after Dunkirk, which of course we all know about from the movies and stuff. Anyway, but some people, the Russians were getting upset because they were fighting off the Germans, and we were sitting idle in England and stuff, and the Americans now were getting restless and so on. But Churchill, as you just heard from the general earlier, anyway, they had that meeting of Casablanca. You know all this story, I'm telling you. But so they decided that they'd please the Germans, the Russians, and the Americans, and they're going to go into the soft underbelly of Europe, go into Italy in the soft underbelly, and so that was when that was in July when we went into Sicily and started the pleasant D-Day Dodger activity from there on. What else can I talk about? I suppose you want to know something about what I did and what. So, all right. Well, I was in the artillery. I don't think there's anybody in this room that knows what the artillery is, but if you're in the artillery, you're called a gunner. I could say, is there anybody in this room that wasn't a gunner? So I'm not, so anyway, I can't tell you what the artillery is. I'm not going to tell you that they're the ones that fire the cannons and that. So I ended up in B Troop of the 11th Battery of the 9th Battery of the 11th Field Regiment, the 11th Field Army Regiment. That's some significance to the words field and army artillery, because if you're in the field regiment, that means you're with the smaller artillery pieces, not the big ones, but the field were our 25-pounder guns, which we could move fast and keep up with the infantry, and so they were field guns, and we were army troops. So if you're an army regiment, it means you're not. Most artillery regiments are attached to a particular division. And in Italy, there were two divisions, the 1st and the 5th, and so. But we, as army, we were not attached to either one, so we had to serve in both. And when one was having a little time and didn't need artillery, then we were shipped. So we were kept very busy, and that was very purposeful, and that made being a D-Day Dodger even more fun. So what else? Oh, well, the 25-pounder gun, well, you know all about the 25-pounder gun, except maybe it's too old for you, but for us, the 25-pounder was the latest. It had just been created, just as I started active service. The 25-pounder gun was brought into service. It was a new invention, and we replaced the old 4.5 gun. And this was, it was such a wonderful gun. It had, I won't go into the details of there isn't time, of all the advantages of a 25-pounder with a split trail, and it was a gun howitzer. And we ever pleased and proud of that gun. It was something very special. Well, you know, I could say something though about the German. Well, you know, when you were in action and this gun would fire. Of course, I won't talk about the details of the different shells that could fire different. Smoke shells or, of course, explosive shells, which we used to keep the heads down of the enemy and so on. And once we fired, they turned out to be propaganda shells. And God, we got one and opened, and inside it was the shell. It was filled with propaganda leaflets in German, and it said, "If you are got as a prisoner, you have the chance of enjoying a great education in Canada." And that's what these propagandas. So that was one very purposeful form anyway. But the 25-pounder was a great gun, and as you know, the enemy had their guns, and as they fired, you could hear the shells coming. You know, you knew when you heard that sound, you could throw yourself on the ground or find a pit to jump into and grab fast. The only trouble was that halfway through the Italian campaign, the Germans got a gun called the 88 millimeters, and its shell traveled faster than the speed of sound. Was that, so if you heard that, you knew, it was too late to do anything, you know, you either had got it. Anyway, enough of that stuff. So what else can I talk about? I was, what was my role as, I was a junior officer, lieutenant in this B troop and 9th Battery, and there was another officer with me who was more senior, but he got knocked out fairly soon, and he wasn't killed, but he got badly knocked out. So I took over as the GPO, the gun position officer, in charge of the whole troop, and my role was I'd be given a map location to bring my guns up to. You know, we tried to keep up with the infantry and keep behind it to support them, and so I'd be given a gun position, and then I'd bring my 4 guns up and give them location in the field or wherever it was, and they'd dig their gun pits and get in, and I'd get my command post, which I would dig with my command post staff, and from the command post and incidentally, you know, it didn't matter if you were an officer, you dug with the others as fast as you could, because you wanted to get that pit dug so before, you know, the shells started coming out. Anyway, so sometimes, of course, we may find an old Italian house, and I could use it sometimes, but that didn't work so often. Anyway, so, and from my gun position, I controlled the firing of my guns with a tannoy system, which was a very modern thing then. It was a speaker system, and we had lines going out to phone lines going to each gun, of course, and they were constantly being knocked out by enemy gunfire explosion. But anyway, so that was my job, controlling the 4 guns and so on, and that was interesting, and I could tell you stuff about that and read stuff out of the diary, how that was sometimes, and also you had a job of fooing, and everybody here knows what a foo is. If I were to say who doesn't know what fooing is, nobody would be putting up their hands, because you all know what a foo is. You don't know what a foo is? Anybody else? No, you all know what foos are. Forward observation officer. You know, I did my turn, even though I was a gun position officer. You do your turn fooing, And that means, of course, you go forward with the infantry and when they're going into attack, and you've got your wireless set with you that connects you back to your guns, and so you can, when I think of an example, say I'm going forward, we've just crossed a river, and it's a struggle, and we just get across, and there's an enemy machine gunner stopping us, and the infantry captain says, "Come on," he said, "Get on your set and get your guns on that guy." So I try that, I get back, but the damn wireless set isn't working, and I just quote that as one of my fooing experiences, which was a little depressing. But anyway, so fooing. Oh gosh, I'm not going to read out of the diary, but you've seen some of the quotes. Well, okay, so anyway, and of course we moved up Ortona, and then we on the East Coast, and then we moved across to Casino. I'm sure somebody's heard of Monte Cassino, the Battle of Monte Cassino. Well, the objective was that we wanted to get the generals, people like you generals, wanted to get to Rome fast, and that was the objective. The only way we could do it was get up the Leary Valley, and it was quite narrow. And here was the Germans had occupied this beautiful 5th century monastery at the top of Monte Cassino, which stopped us, and they could command. So anyway, and incidentally, one of the sort of horrors of war is that we bombed that because the Germans destroyed this beautiful, iconic structure, and actually because they were occupying it and using it to observe. Well, after we ruined it, it was a better use. They could use the rubble better than they could with the monastery still. Anyway, so that's just one of the many sort of ridiculous things of war. So anyway, where am I? I'm at Casino. Well, so it was weeks and weeks trying to get past up the Leary Valley to get to Rome. Now, our regiment was the 1st Canadian regiment there, and we were 7 weeks with our guns at the foot of Monte Cassino, and that was a very interesting D-Day Dodger experience. They could, every time we moved, they could see us, and at night our gun flashes, they could spot that. We did finally get something on the muzzle to stop the gun flashes a bit. You know all about the gunners say. Anyway, so yeah, Casino was. I could read stuff out of my diary of how the number of shells that landed in our troops, and the times that I had to run out when somebody was wounded, and with a direct hit in a gun pit, and so on. It was very awful, but I was lucky. I got nicked once running. A shell landed, and I got splintered in the leg, but it wasn't too bad. I was able to put what you'd call a Band-Aid on it, and I didn't have to go out of action. So that was anyway. So those 7 weeks were something for a D-Day Dodger to say, to brag about, I guess. I don't know. Then we am I using half my time? Some of you go home now. You can don't please. Anyway, I'll tell you something that'll bore you and make you go home. No, we went across to the others. We went through the Hitler line. We had to break it, and we just crossed the Rapido to get in towards Rome. When we got the news on. What was it? July the 6th. It was something, I think it was called D-Day. And, well, we were thrilled to hear about D-Day because we'd been fighting quite a while, and we were glad to hear that. And, we were thrilled to keep up with the news there, and even though they didn't keep up with our news, but that's all right. So what else? Okay. Oh, I did, this will, anyway, I did have a leave, a holiday, a week's holiday, and I took advantage of that and went to Rome. And so while I was in Rome, Rome was just like not a wartime city. It was very civilized. We had a wonderful time there and so on. But I decided to go and visit the Vatican. I'm not a Catholic, but I thought I'd like to see the Vatican. And so I went to the Vatican and saw this beautiful cathedral. And while I was in it, I saw a door at the corner, and I thought I'll go and explore that. I walked in there, and it was a room half the size of this one. And by Jove, into this room suddenly walked the Pope. And the Pope saw me, and he came over. He saw me there in uniform, and he came over and he put his hand on my head and blessed me. And so that's how lucky. You see, you don't want to hear this crap, but anyway, and that's how I survived the war, and how I've had a lot of lucky things in life, thanks to the Pope. So I don't know. So okay, well, I'll just about wind up. But I got to tell you, then we did move over after we'd been fighting for all these months. We got to the north, and we're just about to get to our objective, which was to go to the top of Italy. But then they decided that the guys that weren't D-Day Dodgers up in Northwest would like us to come and help them. So in February, mid-February, we came out, put our guns on landing craft, and went across the Mediterranean, landed at Marseille, went up the Rhone Valley, and went into action in Holland. And that, we're talking about Italy and D-Day Dodgers, so I can't tell you about Holland except just to say that by then it was a piece of cake, because it wasn't a piece of cake before we came, but by the time we got there, the Germans were on the run. In fact, they should have quit, because a lot of them got killed unnecessarily because they were losing. Anyway, I won't go on about Holland, but it was quite something to go into a Dutch village when it for 4 years had been, the Germans were so mad at the Dutch because they wouldn't align themselves. So the Germans treated them with it really rough. And so for 4 years, these German villages had been just under the thumb and mistreated. And so if you were the first ones after 4 years, I would walk in, my troop would walk into a Dutch village and be the first one. Can you imagine the reception that we got and how the Dutch people appreciated us and so on and so on. Anyway, enough of that. So I'll stop. So then VDE Day came. I was at that point, my guns were in a field up. We'd got up to the top of Holland and just crossed the border up at the northeast corner. And I was in a German farm field with my guns, and oddly enough, the farmer and his wife and so on, I thought they'd be a little they were very, very friendly, and they were cooperative. But anyway, so that's where I got the thrill of I got a message to get on the phone. There was a message, and I got an officer wanted an officer to go, and I went on the phone, and there was a message that the war was going to be over at 0800 hours and blah blah blah. That was actually 3 days before the official ending, but then I was able to next day to give the order. When you want to stop firing, you say cease fire, but when you say cease firing, that means it's really finished. And I was able to give that marvelous order, cease firing, and that was the end of the war. And that was in this field with anyway, blah blah. So I'll stop. I could read stuff out of the diary, but we'll see. So anyway, so the Italian campaign, we finished. So it was worthwhile. You heard the general say that there were 20. He said 22 divisions, or there were 23 or 22 divisions of panzers there. So we did draw a lot of the Germans off the Northwest Europe field. There were 100,000 Canadians in uniform in Italy, and almost 6,000 killed and 20,000 wounded. So there was and of course, the population of Canada then was a third of what it is now. So it was significant, and D-Day Dodgers, perhaps they did make a contribution and can feel some satisfaction. Oh gosh, here's I found this in a file. This is out of the Globe and Mail, and it's August 2004, and it talks of, the heading is Canadians Who Fought in Italy, an Unappreciated Chapter. This is the Globe and Mail in 2004. And there's just one chapter I might read here, one paragraph. Oh, the veterans of these great events are, this is in 2004, that's 14 years ago, the veterans of these great events are aging quickly. Therefore, we want to bring attention to this understated chapter while they are still around to participate. So that's why, you won't have me very much more. But anyway, but that's an interesting bit of Globe and Mail appreciation for the D-Day Dodgers. And there's some more, but so I'll stop now. It just, what'll I say? In reflection. I want to say that the men that were in my troop were absolutely the most wonderful group of men you could have. They were spread from across Canada. We came together. They had been in England, and they were from all levels of society, and truck drivers and all ages and so on. And here was this Rosedale kid coming in to take over and command them and so on. But once we got into action and worked together as a team, we bonded, and they were the most marvelous group, and we worked together, and it didn't matter where you came from, and that was all forgotten about. They were so great that I just really dearly loved them and was so proud of that troop of men. Yes, so anyway, that's just thinking about the war and how tough it was to be a D-Day Dodger, but not nearly as tough as it was to be an Italian civilian. The civilians took an awful beating. We took over we at least had uniforms, we had guns and protection and helmets. They were killed by the shelling, and either we or the enemy shelled their houses, ruined their farms, and took all their livestock and so on, and they were devastated, and families, kids were killed and so on. The civilians were the ones to really feel sorry for. So anyway, I'll just conclude by saying that about 20 years after the war, my wife and I decided to, we were on holidays in Rome, and I had kept my war map of the casino gun position area, and so I thought we'd go down and visit it, because that map was very accurate. I could pinpoint where my guns were to the nearest yard from this map. So anyway, I hired a driver in a car, and we drove down there, and I knew exactly where it was, and I carried my wife across it. And we saw, and the spot was there, but it can't be. I said, here was this, the last time I'd seen it, it was a mess of broken houses, shell holes, mud, gun pits, smashed trees, just a disaster. Now I'm looking at a place, the birds are singing, the fields are green, the trees are blooming, the houses were all beautiful. It can't be the same place. There was a farmer in the field, and I called him over, Andiamo Venne qua, and he said, yes, he said, I was a ragazzo then, and he said, I'll show you. He took me down to the end of this field where there had been one of our command posts dug into a bank, which hadn't been plowed over. And I recognized that, and my God, this was our gun pit. This was our gun position, and there were some still shell holes that hadn't been. So then, when we left, I stopped and held my wife's hand and looked back at this and said, this is the way God meant this place to be. War is such a stupid thing. Okay, I think that's all I can tell you. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Well, so ladies and gentlemen, Jack, on behalf of all of our guests and of course the RCMI, I'd like to thank you for an extraordinary presentation. Your warmth and humor have made it very special, and I think the Pope would be very proud of you. If not a little envious of the fact that you've reached 98 years and he hasn't, so there you go. Over the years, Jack, we've enjoyed numerous speakers at our annual D-Day Dodgers Luncheon, but our greatest and our fondest, and I think our proudest memories are the presentations that have been made by those who chose to serve Canada and the Commonwealth and participated in the Italian campaign as you did. And so in thanking you, I also want to assure you that those present today will always remember the sacrifices that were made under extreme physical and mental challenges and the great danger that was faced in sunny Italy. We'll also remember the enormous accomplishments that you and other young Canadians achieved in Sicily and Italy in 1943 and 44 and 45. And we recognize the credit you are due and the great debt that we owe you. So thank you very much. I have a few small tokens of our appreciation.
Oh, it's time.
Now, Jack, we'd like you to wear that and certainly remind you of your day-to-day here with us. It was a great honor for us.
Explain the tie.
Well, this is the RCMI tie.
Oh, yes.
So we have a president and a former president who assured us that this is something that you are absolutely welcome to wear at any time and join us here in the club.
Well, thank you. That's a beautiful tie, and I shall wear it with pleasure.
Terrific. Now, I have another gift to give you. Normally, I would like to present you with something that would be mindful of Italy, and of course the normal libation is grappa, and that would probably be an appropriate drink. But I've actually drunk grappa, and I can assure you that the makers of Calvados and Armagnac are not going to be in any danger. So rather than punish you, I thought I'd find for you a bottle of Prosecco.
Oh, thank you.
Now you're probably wondering why I was such a cheap bastard and bought the small one, and it's because, Jack, it allowed me to put it in this, and you've probably seen one of these before.
Oh my God!
This is a 25-pounder shell casing, Jack. You're familiar with it.
Yeah.
But what's more important is I'm quite familiar with the provenance of that particular shell, and the date on the bottom is 1944.
Can I keep this?
It's yours, and it's very likely you fired it yourself. So. So it's a great place to hide Prosecco, and it's our way of thanking you for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Thanks again.
So we come to this point in the program just before we trash Lady Astor. It's tradition that we mark the veterans and the units represented from the Italian campaign who are here. And I didn't probably get everybody, so whoever I miss, I need to know about. But here we have, of course, Captain Jack Rhind of the Royal Canadian Artillery. Then Mr. John Percival, who's sitting here, who was RCR, Royal Canadian Regiment in Italy. John, do you want to stand? And came today all the way from Sarnia. and Sergeant Alan Stapleton, who was 1st Division Signals. Are there any other Italian veterans here today that I've missed? That's it. The units that are represented, certainly the RCR, as we've said, the 48th Highlanders, the Royal Canadian Navy, who were there guarding the shores, the Royal Canadian Air Force, the Royal Canadian Artillery, and the Royal Canadian Engineers. Malcolm, got it. And any other folks representing any units that were here. Certainly the Gray and Simcoe Foresters that we're connected with reinforced a whole lot of outfits, and so the Honorary Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Carroll. Any other units?
The Royal Scots Army Tank Corps.
Thank you. Any others? Okay. Thank you. And bless them all. So in our great tradition, the maestro is at the keyboard, and we need you to sing loud and long. This particular tune was written by a D-Day Dodger somewhere, and it's to the tune of Lily Marlene, which was actually a German Army song, but these particular words are very poignant. So.
We are the D-Day Dodgers, always on the Vino, always on the street. 8th Army Steiners and their tanks, we go to war with ties and slacks. We are the D-Day Dodgers in sunny Italy. Sang songs, the beer was free. We are the D-Day Dodgers in sunny Italy. The Moro and Casino were taken our stride. We didn't really fire, we went there for the ride. Sleeping till noon and playing games. We live in Rome with lots of days. We are the D-Day Dodgers in sunny Italy. On our way to Florence, we had a lovely time. We drove a bus from Rimini right through the Gothic line. Into Bologna we did go. We all went swimming in the Hoe. We are the D-Day Dodgers from sunny Italy. Dearest Lancaster, you think you're right? Standing on the platform, talking Tommy Rot. Hearing the sweetheart and her cry. We think your mouth is much too wide for all the D-Day Dodgers in sunny Italy. Around the mountains, in the mud rain, the voice crosses something there no name. Heartache and toil and suffering gone, the boys being Indian and some later on. They're the D-Day Dodgers who stay.
Way to go, Gino.
This has been another in our series of webcasts produced by the Royal Canadian Military Institute in Toronto as a public educational service. You can find news of upcoming events and links to our webcast archives at www.rcmi.org. On behalf of the RCMI, this is Eric Morse saying goodbye for now and thank you for joining us.